Hi, I'm Holly with Stella Quilts, and today we're continuing our series on 50 blocks for 50 states using the patterns from this book. The information is in the description box below, so check that out. Today's block is the block for Delaware. This block has 4 corner units that have curved piecing. I had to practice this a couple of times because it's not a skill that I've mastered yet. So I did practice before doing this recording. It also has some sashing units as well as a corner unit. So let's go ahead and just jump right in and get started. The first unit we're going to work on is the corner units. We'll need 4 of each of these. To make one unit, we're going to need a 7.5-inch square of our dark color and a 7-inch square of our light. From this, we're going to cut some quarter circles. I'm going to fold my fabric here into fourths. Make sure my corner here is nice and straight. This way I can cut all of the quarter circles I need for one unit all at once. I'm going to use my circle cutting template here. This one came from Easy Quilting, which is a Simplicity product. And to do this, I'm going to line up the edge line and my center line along the raw edges of my folded square. From this, we're going to cut on the 7-inch circle line. The goal is to have a radius that's 3 3/4 inches. So I'm just going to come here. Cut. It should give me then 4 quarter circle pieces. Some of the folds might be connected still, so I'm just going to trim those with my scissors. It's going to be fine. Next, I'm going to do something very similar with my light fabric. I'm going to fold it into quarters. And again, with the raw edges even, I'm going to cut my circle. For this one, I'm going to line up my edge line, my center line, and I'm going to use the 6-inch line here for my circle. The goal on this one is to have the part that's cut out have this radius equal 3 1/4 inches. I didn't quite get that all the way, so I'm just going to go ahead and nip that. This is then the center of our unit, and we need to attach our dark circles to the sides. Now that I'm at the sewing machine, I'm going to take my pieces. I have 4 of the quarter circles plus then the center piece. And I'm going to just start sewing them on one at a time. To do that, I'm going to sew with the outer curve on the top. So I'm going to fold my quarter circle in half, mark my center point. I'm going to fold my center in half, mark. Actually, I should fold it this way. Just a finger press. Then I'm going to match up my centers. I'm generally not a big pinner, but I found that pinning a couple places on the curved piecing helped me to make sure everything just came out nice and smooth. So I'm going to pin the end to keep that where it needs to be. And because of how small the piece is on the end here, I found it helpful to just pin it while I'm getting it lined up under the needle. I didn't always pin it, but it did help me just kind of lining things up underneath the needle. Once I have my needle down though, I was able to just remove that pin. And then I'm just going to slowly and carefully sew down my 1/4 inch seam here, making sure that the top fabric is just lining up nice and even with the edge of my curve. Adjusting as needed. And just make sure to always have the needle down if I need to pick up the foot. And that's my first corner. I found that as I was doing this, I liked to have, as I was practicing, I like to have the seam pressed towards the circle. So on the back, it looks like this. Then I'm just going to continue around all 4 sides. I'll go ahead and press this and complete the other 3 quadrants. Now that I've sewn all 4 of these units together, I'm going to square them up to the desired size, which is 6.5 inches. So I'm going to lay my 6.5 inch square on here, and as I'm doing this, I'm checking to see that my 3 1/4 marks line up with the points of the intersections, just to try and keep it as centered as possible. And I'll do that to all 4 of these units, and then we'll get started with the next unit section. For the next unit, we're going to need some diamond pieces. We'll need 8 of those, 2 for each section. We'll need some of these rectangles with a 60-degree angle cut, as well as we're going to need some 60-degree triangles. So I'm going to show you how to cut each one of these sections. For the diamonds, we're first going to cut our strip that is 1 3/4 inches tall. And then to cut the diamond, we're going to use either the 60-degree line on your mat to cut the 60-degree angle here. I used my 60-degree ruler, and then I just lined up the edge. And went ahead and just trimmed that edge off. And then measured in 1 3/4 inches from the edge that was trimmed, the angle side. And that gives me my diamond. For the 60-degree triangles, I'm going to cut a strip that is, how tall are you? Three and 3/4. And we're going to do the same thing. My 60-degree triangle has a flat top. That notch helps to line things up. What we're going for is actually 3 3/4 inches tall here. So I've gone ahead and lined up my ruler and I trimmed it. So I've got one end with a notch, the other ends don't have the notch. That's okay on this project. We don't need all of the notches trimmed. On some, you might want to do that. So we're going to need a total of 8 of these. And that gave me all 8 that I needed. For the last piece, we need a rectangle that is 2.5 by 4.5. And we need that 60-degree angle on the side. We do need a right and a left. So to get the right and left, by cutting the strip, 2.5-inch strip, then by keeping the strip set folded so that the wrong sides are together, I can use my 60-degree triangle ruler here. I can cut one edge, then I can measure in from the point my 4.5, cut, then measure again 4.5 and line up my 60-degree edge so that I can maximize the strip. Or I could just cut the strips into 2.5 by 4.5 rectangles, use my 60-degree triangle, line up one of the lines on my triangle with the bottom of my rectangle here until it lines up with the point, and then just trim off the angle. You can also use the 60-degree line on your ruler or your cutting mat to help get that cut. This unit ends up looking a little odd. So we're going to have our diamonds, and then I'm going to have to separate my rectangles into my right and left piles. But I'm going to sew it onto this side first, making sure that I have a 1/4 inch up top here so that my seam allowance hits the point, and then sew down. Then I'll open it up and I'll add the second strip to the adjacent side. The first side's been sewn onto the diamond and we've pressed it back. So now we're going to sew the second side on. I'm going to sew it on so that this ends up being a straight line right here. To do that, we're going to fold it over. We're going to have the 1/4 inch poking out so that this intersection is at our 1/4 inch mark, and we're going to sew it down. The second side has been sewn on and pressed back. This unit starts to look really bizarre as we go through the process. It's okay. We're going to trim it and square it to the right size when everything is done. So the next step is to add one of our equilateral triangles, one of our 60-degree triangles, to the side. You'll want to add it to the same side for all of these unit sections. So I'm going to add it with that notched edge up against my diamond, and then I'm just going to sew down this side. And here's where our unit looks like now after we've added the 60-degree triangle. We're going to take another unit with the 60-degree triangle, we're going to rotate it, and then we're going to sew the two units together. To make sure that you keep your point at the intersection of the diamonds, you'll want to line up so that when you pull it back slightly at the 1/4 inch mark, you can see that the 2 points meet up. I'll end up lining it up, pinning that spot so that when I'm sewing, I can be as accurate as I possibly can with getting that point in place. So I'm going to take these to the sewing machine and then we will start trimming them up. And here is that unit all pieced together. The next step is to trim it down so that it is 6.5 by 3.5. So I'm going to start with my 6.5 cut, and I'm going to use the edges of my red triangles here to make sure that they're straight. And then I'm going to measure in to about 3.25 to the center where the diamonds meet, just so I can try and keep that as centered as possible. I'll go ahead and trim off that side, then rotate and trim off the other side. And then this needs to be trimmed down to 3.5. So I'm going to again use my ruler here. I want to make sure I have at least 1/4 inch on either side of these diamonds. And I can see that if I put my ruler in the corner of the triangles, that comes to the 3.5 line, which makes it nice and easy to go ahead and trim. And then I will rotate and trim. And that's what the unit block looks like. The last unit is going to be an hourglass unit. To do that, we're going to take our squares, one of each, dark and light, and then we're going to cut them diagonally in half from corner to corner. We'll lay out our hourglass. And then sew it together by sewing the 2 separate units and then sewing the whole thing together. Now that we have all of the units ready to go, we're going to go ahead and lay out the block. So that's the layout. Now I'll just sew it together just like a 9 patch. Thank you for joining me today while we worked on the Delaware block. This block was a little bit was a challenge for me since I am not proficient at curved piecing, and it was therefore a little bit of a challenge even just figuring out the measurements to be able to put out for all of you. But I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you continue to join us. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out when the next video is released, and have a wonderful day and happy quilting.